walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya ho, hey ya, hey, hey ya ho. Following the serpentine path, life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artesana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Wadia Seed. I'm your host, and it is such a joy to have a really wonderful friend and sister here on the podcast, Jaontra, JJ Henderson of Full Spectrum Birthworkers. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So let's start with the question that I love to ask all of my guests, which is if our ancestors were here with us now, which of course they always are, how would they introduce you and what role would they say that you play in your family lineage?
I really, really love this question. I think it can just be so easy for us to get lost in the world and who we are and what we came here for. And I think something that my ancestors would say is, one, I'm here to just be a student. I'm here to learn, and relearn and unlearn some of the things that I've been taught and that I've learned throughout my life, and also to just relearn some of the things that we've been disconnected from, that we've been forced to forget or that we've had to hide throughout our history. I think is something that comes to mind. I think of also like a bridge or like a weaver. So often in this world, I feel like things are like very separate and individual and boxed into categories. And I'm very much like, okay, how can we connect them? How can we make them talk to each other? How do we make them like work together as a team? Which is something that I'm just very passionate about. Um, Knowing that like we're so much better and stronger when we work together than anything that we can do on our own. And then I think reorienting people to power and to choice is something that I really think my ancestors have brought me here for. And I think in my own lineage, specifically having power and choice around motherhood and parenting, and not feeling like it's something that I have to just do or throw myself into just because of the pressure of the world. But they've really given me a strong spine to stand firm and walking that path when I feel like it's the right time, and also supporting other people and doing the same, of just drowning out the noise, drowning out the pressure, and really focusing on what feels right to us, what feels aligned for us, when it feels aligned for us, instead of rushing to get somewhere, or just some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, I love that you said, they would refer to me probably as a student, as like a lifelong learner, someone here to continue learning. And that's the context that we met each other. We met in class, which was so wonderful. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But I feel that as well. I feel like kind of the people that I'm co-weaving with, you spoke a lot to like, what does it mean to reweave all of these incredible teachings and the wisdom that we carry within us? What does it mean to reweave that inside of ourselves and in community as well? And I feel like those are the people that I'm always kind of in conversation and in community with. And more, I find that among women who are working in the realms of reproductive care, the realms of birth work, the realms of preconception and postpartum, all of that kind of stuff. That's the weaving that I'm doing, but I do feel that it weaves out into so many other aspects of our lives, which we're definitely going to get into in this conversation. But it's true. I really love being in community with other students. Even people, even some of my like most incredible teachers, some of my like oldest elders would say things like, I'm still a child. Like I still know nothing. I'm still learning every single day. I'm learning from my students. And I think it's just such an incredible mark of what it means to really walk a path of service, right? To just always be ready to be learning more, to be learning more from our clients, to be learning more from our relationships, learning more from the land and what she speaks to us. Like, I'm so excited for everything we're going to get into. I already feel it coming. Okay. I'm gonna like simmer down before I get carried away because I'm so excited. I'll give people a little bit of context for how we met. So, JJ and I are both students in the Holy Well, which I've spoken about a lot on the podcast, which is a space that is co-facilitated by our teachers, Kittis Dache and Maura Flynn. And there's a lot of other wonderful women that help to co-weave in that space. And we originally were in the same container about a year ago at this point, a container called Sovereign Cycles, which was supporting women with pregnancy prevention outside of the medical system. And then we've also been in another container, a year-long container called Chrysalis. And then the point when we really, really crossed paths actually was in this amazing bodywork training that we both did with our teachers, Kittis Dache, Maura Flynn, Naima Pierce, and Prairie Wolf. And part of that was like an online module and then in-person hands-on skills that we did in Oregon. And so we get to Oregon and we get to Kittis' amazing land that she lives on with Maura and other community members. And JJ and I were sharing a yurt, which was so fun. We were in a yurt with another beautiful sister who's been on the podcast before, Brianna George. And I loved JJ immediately. She had the cutest, like most bubbly, joyful, just like hilarious energy about her. And in a way that was like very low key and not like loud or crazy or like dramatic in any way, but like she just cracked me up so much. And the more and more that I got to know her, I was just like, oh my God, I want to keep talking with her. And the more and more that we shared, the more that we were able to link some commonalities in our stories that, to be able to share things with a sister who has been through similar things to you and to meet someone eye to eye and say, like, I carry that too. I walk with that too, was just such an immense moment of healing for me. Some beautiful conversations that we got to share. And also just being able to pick your brain about a lot of different things and to just ask your perspective about like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And you offered such beautiful medicine with every question that I asked that I was like, I just want to keep talking with her. And also, I really want to have her on the show. So that's like a little bit of context of what JJ and I's relationship has looked like thus far. She always cracks me up. We like before we got on recording, we were just like cracking up. She's hilarious. She has such a joyful spirit, and she also walks with deep integrity, with her work. She walks with the medicine of like gentleness and softness and sweetness, but what she spoke to, a straight spine and a really clear orientation of what does it mean to reorient to right relationship with power? What does it mean to come back into a really clear understanding of autonomy and sovereignty and authority over my own body and my own reproductive system and what it would mean to bring life into this world? Like that's the medicine that you're so steeped in your own life, and then it reflects out into all that you do. So she's really a freaking rock star. And yeah, I'll stop gushing about her, give her a little bit of time to just talk about her own path, her work, and what she's orienting to. So anything that you want to share with the listeners, I'm very happy to hear.
Yeah, I did just want to add a little bit about like us meeting, and something that really stood out to me when I met you was just you're talking about Whitney Houston, and I love Whitney Houston. And so when you brought her up, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna need to talk to this woman some more and see what's up with her. That just brought me so much joy.
Yeah, I basically the night before the bodywork training, I like landed in Oregon and I had watched this Whitney Houston like biopic, not documentary, but like the movie about her. And I was like sobbing. And so I showed up with like Whitney Houston just like on my heart. I love her. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. But thank you so much for sharing this reflection with me. I feel like it's so interesting because growing up felt so hard. I feel like just like being a child in this world, especially being a child where like I don't really know what my purpose was at the moment, but I knew I activated things in people. And it was very challenging to navigate as a kid. One, because I'm like, I didn't even know that I was doing it. I'm not doing it intentionally. Um, there's times I'm just in class, I'm learning, I'm asking a question. Is this true? Or, ooh, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't land right in my spirit. Um, and there can actually be a lot of just like getting beat down that I think happens to people, especially people that are here for like purposes like we are to like support and healing and liberation work. And I feel like I had to just start to hide so many parts of myself is like what comes to mind. And I was like, okay, well, what can I do in this world and like not get beat down or pointed, made to feel like isolated or separated? Like what can I do to really help myself survive and thrive? And so I feel like I really compartmentalized and like honed in on like, well, I'm just gonna be the good student. I'm gonna be the smart person. This feels safe. This feels better for me to like live in and operate in. But then as I started to grow up, like it just felt like so many pieces of me like weren't being poured into in the ways that they needed to. And I'm thinking specifically about just like my love of like ritual and like spirituality. It's always been something that I deeply cared about, was always interested in, but I didn't have like a super religious family. I did go to Catholic school, and was able to get like some of that met. But like as I look back and reflect, I was like, I was really, really hungry for just like spiritual care. And I think part of that comes from all these like spiritual attacks that I was feeling, or just feeling like, oh, I'm just this complicated person. I make things harder. And then looking back, like, no, actually, I was just operating at a different level than what was expected of me in school. I wasn't just focused on, okay, well, what's the curriculum? What's this? What's that? But again, I was really trying to be that bridge of like, this doesn't feel true for me, whether it's like learning about biology or learning something about our bodies, or, about the history about this country, where I'm like, it just feels like there's something that's not all the way true here that I wanted to like unearth. Getting into birth work now, it makes so much sense. Being next to that, like, you know, we're in the life and death realm. That's something that always has felt really comfortable to me, like having the hidden conversations or people like bringing me stories and emotions that like they don't feel comfortable or safe bringing anywhere else. I've kind of always been like a safe space for those types of things. I've been a safe space for people who are like struggling with different things, whether it's, oh, maybe I want to try out, being gender nonconforming, for example, or maybe there's another major that I actually want to try out that I'm scared to pursue because I don't want to disappoint my parents. Just like always being like a listening ear, like a big heart, a space for people to be able to come and unload some of those things. Um, are some of the things that come to mind. And I think really in these past years, since I've really like dedicated myself to my birthwork journey, it's been a matter of really fortifying my boundaries so I can really figure out who am I at my core versus what are the things I've like put on to keep myself safe? What are the things I've put on to like make other people happy? And really at this point in my life, I'm at a point of like, whoosh, how do we like push all of those things to the side and really just be who I am? Um, and I think part of me is still figuring some of that out, but I really know that like just deep down at my core, like to what you're speaking at, I am this very gentle spirit with a really big heart um, that's needed protection, that hasn't always gotten that protection. And so I've like built my armor and my walls up very high to keep myself safe. And now I'm learning there are other ways to do those things, um, and other ways that I can be in the world where I don't have to hide myself, but I get to just be who I am instead of not.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you on being someone who sees through bullshit, like in school or in conversations or just in the world, like walking through the world and just being like, this isn't it. Like there's something really off. And I, as a young person, can't put words to it, but my body knows that like something about this is not the truth. And there's 1,001 different versions of what truth could be. I think the way that I align to truth these days is like, is this in right relationship with the laws of nature? Is this in right relationship with what the land teaches us is like reciprocity and true relationship and true communion with all of our ancestors, all of the living beings, all of the descendants to come, all of the realms? Like, is this walking a straight path? And like, no, I don't think this thing is. And the amount of like feeling very attacked when I was younger, I can resonate with that a lot. And even still, I think I've definitely grown like a thicker skin and a stronger spine to just be able to be like, it's not my job to convince anyone of anything. It's not my job to show them a different way or tell them that they're doing things wrong. It's really my job at the end of the day to figure out what right alignment looks like for me. And what you were speaking to of just having boundaries, of saying like, yes, I can hold space for other people's opinions. I can hold space for people's pain. I can hold space for death. I can hold space for birth. I can hold space for trauma and suffering and for joy and contentment and pleasure and fulfillment and like all of the juiciness of life. And also to learn how to have that clear structure of like, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. And I can definitely relate to that. I mean, my sister, oh my God, my sister was just like laughing. She was like, the conversations that you have with people, like since you were a kid, like people coming to me crazy, telling me crazy, crazy stuff, people telling me about assaults that they've been through, people telling me about abortions that they've had that they've never told anyone, people telling me about like really, really crazy stuff within like 5 minutes of meeting me. And me always just kind of being like, yeah, tell me more. Like I don't know where I that capacity came from since I was very, very young, but I do think that that is something that those of us who go into the realms of like birth and death, you have to be able to walk with that. It's wonderful to be able to walk with like, oh, the beautiful baby arrived in the world and like the family is so happy and joyful. That's wonderful. But you can't walk with that unless you can also walk with a woman who's like going through any kind of pregnancy loss or really, really difficult time conceiving or a horrible breakup with the man that she thought was going to be the father of her children or a stillbirth. Like all of that capacity has to be developed. And I think that's really the skill building of what you were speaking to, the boundaries. And I think that we're incredibly lucky that we have teachers. I have many teachers, but the teachers that we share, Kiddes and Mora, are really clear about like developing the practitionership around how we resource ourselves, which we're definitely going to get into more in this conversation. But there's a lot there that could be said that we're going to say. Yeah, so kind of moving forward into the meat of this conversation, we're going to be talking all about the preconception time, which is something that I myself have been deep in the medicine of for many years now. I know that you have as well. And I also know that that's more where your practice is shifting to these days after attending so many births and after being deep in that like birth portal space. You're deciding to move more into the preconception care time, which for people who maybe are thinking about like, what does preconception mean? Technically, it's like your entire life leading up to pregnancy. It's not just like maybe the 3 months that you're deciding to do a cleanse, right? It's like the entirety of your maidenhood portal and what that has looked like for you thus far and all of the things that you're carrying with your health, with your ancestry, with your bloodline, with your relationship to your body, with your partnership, with your work. Like it's all interwoven into the really, really sacred time of preconception. I feel like a lot of women maybe just want to rush through it because they're like, I just want to get to motherhood, kind of what you were speaking to, or like the societal pressure of like, when are you going to pump out a baby, versus really bringing sacredness back into what the preconception time is, which is truly like the preparation of what kind of mother you're going to birth yourself into and what kind of family constellation you are going to co-birth into the world with your child, with that child's father, all of that. So let's start by just kind of opening up the conversation about, how women right now in this crazy, weird modern world that we're living in, very fractured and distorted in many ways and out of alignment with the laws of nature, how are we relating to womanhood? How are we relating to sexuality, fertility, and all of the feminine lineage work of motherhood, right? Like everything that comes before motherhood. Where do you feel like women are at these days? What are you seeing?
I feel like the vast majority of women, it feels like we're like dissociating through a lot of that phase, a lot of it through no fault of our own. I mean, this world is not kind to female bodies, it's not kind to women. We live in a world where we're not really taught about the phases of our menstrual cycle, what our bodies need during that time, even like as we're bleeding, that we're supposed to be resting and honoring our boundaries and saying no, and all of those pieces. And so I feel like we oftentimes end up in a situation where we're trying to compete. We're trying to show we can keep up with men. We can do all the things that their bodies can do at the same rate and pace that they can. And it really puts us in a difficult relationship with our bodies when they don't show up in those ways. And we can't really expect them to, given the hormonal fluctuations that we're going through throughout the entire month, essentially. I think that paired on top of the medical system, how they respond to like menstrual issues, it's very like normalized for people to have things like heavy bleeding, painful periods, clots that are actually not normal. Those are typically signs that you may be working yourself too hard throughout your menstrual cycle, that your body's actually asking you to rest. It could be signs that there's another health situation going on that your body's trying to alert you to. But because we're taught, oh, these things are normal, you can just get on birth control, that'll solve it, that'll fix it. We don't have a relationship with our bodies because of that. It's almost like we're outsourcing someone else to like let us know and keep us updated. Oh, okay, the doctor's saying my body's fine, everything must be fine. Or, oh, the doctor's saying something's wrong. Now let's respond to it with birth control or whatever the case may be. And I think that makes it very hard to do some of the tending that you were talking about during the preconception phase, especially when you look at it as not just like, oh, 3 months, maybe a year before I get pregnant, but really that whole time. And that was something for me that was like, I was like, wait, why are we doing all this work focusing on birth when like how old was I when I learned about my menstrual cycle for real, for real? Maybe 26, 27. And I was like, wait, I've been menstruating for like 16 years at this point, and I'm just now getting this information. It really was just like my mind was blown. I was really pissed off. I was frustrated. I'm like, why has no one told me this before? Why has this not been communicated with me? And so then that also puts us in a relationship where we're not in relationship with our power. We're not in relationship with choice, partially because we're also not being given all of the information. We're not being told the truth about our bodies, about these medications that were being recommended to us. And I think about our fertility too. I think we sometimes see it as like a nuisance. It's something we have to control. It's something we have to manage. It's something we have to make fit so that it works with the rest of our lifestyle. And that doesn't mean that like we shouldn't be protective of our fertility and that we shouldn't honor and revere our fertility. But I do think it's done in a way where it is more in the realm of control, um, as opposed to like, oh, I want to know this about myself so I can make decisions or so I can make choices or so, I can make sure that the person that I'm being intimate with respects my choices and my boundaries and how I orient to my body and all of those pieces. And so it puts us in a situation where we're like out of touch with our bodies for, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And then we're like, okay, I want to have a baby now. Let's just expect this to work all perfectly in the way that it should. And I started reading this book recently. It's called Awakening Fertility, like the essential art of preparing for pregnancy. And one of the authors, Hin U, I think her name is, um, comes from like a traditional Chinese medicine background, and she was like saying like, oh, it's kind of interesting to like write this book because people are like, what would you tell people like preparing for pregnancy? And kind of like what you were hinting at, she is from a culture where they've been protecting their fertility potential for their whole life. So she's like, it feels weird to be like, oh, okay, and now what do we want to do when we prepare for pregnancy? Because it's a very different orientation to like what we have in the Western world, where it's like people don't really come to that until they are like, okay, I want to have a baby now. And like you said, sometimes they want to rush past that part of like, well, what does it mean? And I think not just like physically, like, okay, let's make sure like your blood tests are right and that you have nutrient stores and like all of these pieces, but also just like energetically. What does preparing for motherhood look like emotionally, relationally, like all of those pieces we're kind of just really missing out on. And then I think because of that, people are a little shocked when they get into motherhood and they have a baby that they have to take care of and they're not aware of like the work, the time, the energy that goes into it and like how challenging that is in this modern world. And I think maybe if we like paid more attention to it, we'd notice just like being a woman in this time is just hard in general. Um, but those are just some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, so many parts to interweave with, right? Like I kind of starting with, birth control. And what you were speaking to of like a lot of women that when they come into their bleeding years, when they start with menarche, whenever they begin, I got my period at first when I was 13. And it was very painful. And I immediately started having a lot of hormonal imbalance issues because, kind of what you were speaking to, like my fertility had not been taken care of from a young age. My mother didn't know how to do that. That was not taught to her. That was stripped from my lineage, as it's been stripped from so many of our lineages, those women's wisdom keeping ways. And so when I did arrive at menarche with my first bleed, it was traumatic in many ways, right? And then eventually getting on hormonal birth control, getting on the pill when I believe I was 16 because of acne, which a lot of women go on. A lot of women also go on it for like, irregular periods. They say it will regulate your cycle, which is a lie. Painful periods, like all of these issues, maybe PCOS, maybe you're starting to get symptoms of endometriosis and being told like these pills will fix it, when in reality they're masking it. And they're also essentially numbing your body. They're shutting off your connection between your brain, your hypothalamus, and your pituitary gland, and then your ovaries, right? Like it's just like totally severed completely. And so it's essentially stunting your sexual reproductive development. It's stunting your emotional development. It's stunting your spiritual development. And then when you get off of birth control and you're like, I'm ready to have a baby, your body has to essentially relearn how to be a fertile woman. It's been like totally cut off from fertility and from vitality and from that life force energy. And I just finished teaching a class in October all about natural birth control, the natural birth control series, and like natural pregnancy prevention. And it was such a beautiful container to be in. It was a short class, it was only 3 weeks, but it was incredible to see women essentially learning about their menstrual cycles for like the first time. And a lot of these were women who were in like their late 20s or early 30s who were like, I had no idea that cervical mucus was normal. And I was ashamed to look at what was coming out of my body, the cervical mucus that I was finding, on my fingers or on toilet paper or in my underwear, and like being grossed out by my own body. And I'm like, no, babe, like that's your sign of fertility. That's your fifth vital sign. Your cervical mucus and your menstrual blood, like that's your body saying like I'm vital. And seeing women making those connections. And for me, I've been doing a lot of deep womb work for many years now at this point, and it felt almost like, wait, I have to go back to like very, very basics with women, actually. Like all of the things that I thought I was going to teach on, none of that happened because what I realized is like pretty much all of us don't get the foundational understanding of how our bodies work on a biological level. And then on top of that, we don't get any kind of ceremonial or ritual witnessing and initiation into womanhood. And so a lot of us, as we're like in the preconception phase moving towards motherhood, we're essentially having to reinitiate ourselves into womanhood at the same time. And that's very painful. That's very beautiful. Like it is such a beautiful and invigorating and revitalizing path to walk. It's the one that I walk and the one that the women who I'm in community with are so deeply walking as well. And on the other side of that, there's grief. There's deep sadness that comes, or and anger, like being like, I'm however many years old and I'm just now learning that I'm only fertile like this many days out of my cycle. I thought I could get pregnant every single day of my cycle. Why was I on birth control for all this time? What did it do to my hormones? What did it do to my relationships? Like, what did it do to my spirit? Like there's a lot of unpacking to be done. And so with the joy that comes with this like reinitiation into womanhood also comes the grief medicine as well. And tapping into this like collective womb consciousness of dissociation, what you first spoke to, being dissociated from our bodies, being dissociated from our vitality, from our fertility, being scared of our fertility, scared of our bodies, and in teaching this class, I was like, wow, okay, there's like so much more that needs to be done. Like, it's great that I taught these 3 classes, but now I'm realizing like I have to deepen into much more of this education with women because women are really hungry for it. And it's work that you're deeply involved in as well, like this level of education is what brings liberation forth. I think that is like been the biggest thing for me. Learning more about my body makes me feel and believe that I am actually free, that I have choice, that I have power, that I have autonomy. And all of that comes from the medicine that I carry in my womb and that all women carry in our wombs as well. So, kind of moving on to a conversation that we started when we were together in person. And it's, it's personal, but I do think that it is also felt by a lot of women who want to step into the realm of women's reproductive care and specifically birth work. Was that I said to you and another one of the women who was in the yurt with us, I was just like, I just really have this big block of attending births without ever having given birth. Like, I feel like I don't actually have a right to be in a birth space if I'm still a maiden who has not walked through it. Like, what medicine do I have to offer? And the response that you gave me was brilliant. And I was like, wow, I've never thought of it in that way. So I'd love to hear more about your perspective of like, what has been your experience of being a maiden doula, being someone who hasn't moved through the portal of birth, and what you've also seen with mother doulas or mother birth workers and threads that can sometimes get a little bit tangled, maybe is the best word to put it. So what is that medicine of being a maiden birth worker?
Yeah, no, I'll start just so people have a little context about our conversation too. One of the things I said to Claire was that I think one of the nice things about being a maiden doula is that I don't have some of the charge. Because I haven't had my own birth ceremony or experience. Um, and so I feel like there's just less charge around it in terms of like outcomes or, triggers and things that happen. And I was saying, like, just because I know lots of people come to birth work because of their own experiences. And I have met mother doulas who are like, I came to this work because I had a very traumatic birth, or because this happened in a situation with the doctor, with me, or, whatever the case may be. And I know sometimes I've done it myself. That's why I'm very familiar. When something happens to us, we want to be like, we jump into protector, warrior mode. I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. And we don't necessarily tend to like the hurt and the pain and the grief that's like living within us. And so I was just like brought to her attention, like there can be some people who are actually in the birth space who are getting triggered by their clients. Maybe they're, having the experience with their provider that the person wanted, or maybe they're having more support from their partner, for example, where I feel like there's not the same things that can be brought out in those situations, and that can sometimes actually be more dangerous because people are hiring you, asking you to walk with them along this path when actually you need to be tending to yourself and healing from that experience. And so that's just one of the things that comes to mind for me in terms of being a maiden doula versus being a mother doula. I do also think for myself, I had to like think, I'm like, okay, I haven't had this like birth experience, I haven't been pregnant, like I haven't gone through this whole thing, but what are some situations from my life that I can like pull from? There's like, transferable skills that I can pull from this situation to help me feel more confident and prepared. And I know for me, I'm like, okay, well, I don't have that personal experience to pull from, but I'm super confident in my ability to like be present for people, to be a witness for people, to, like some of those pieces is kind of what helped me to get a little bit over the hump. Um, and I think just always checking in with people. I know that there are some people that I've met with where that was actually a very important criteria for them. They wanted someone who walked the path on their own. Okay, now they're, supporting pe other people as they walk their paths. Totally fine. There's other people who honestly don't care as much. I think sometimes it's more of like an energetic match. Like, do we feel like, oh, I want this person to support me? Do I feel like I want to support this person? And I think that's another way I've just been able to tap into and fill into like, does this feel right for me? And I think Honestly, I think just schedule wise, it can work a little bit better too. I don't have any like younger children of my own to like tend to. It's just me and my partner who are both adults, and I do think that allows for more flexibility than sometimes what mother doulas might be able to offer. And I will say, because I've reflected on this a little bit more since our conversation too, and I do wish I didn't have to start with birth as the ceremony, that I was walking with people along. I really would have loved, like, even just doing yoni steams with people or doing tea ceremonies or herbal baths or like smaller, less intense, less risk ceremonies with people before jumping into like I'm gonna be someone's birth companion and birth keeper. Um just because it was a little scary in the ways that I did it, where like I didn't necessarily have a mentor that I was working with. I wasn't necessarily working with like backup folks. And so it felt like this really like big, heavy, intense thing that I was like carrying on my own. Um, and that's not to say that like, oh, that means I shouldn't be supporting people at their birth ceremonies. Just like reflecting back, it was like, oh, there were other ways we could have gotten started and like entered into this work and witnessed like thinking back more like traditionally and ancestrally how that was also the case. Like maiden doulas were still helping out at that time. It's just we were also starting that work from a younger age. We were getting to witness different types of ceremonies over a longer period of time before like, oh, okay, now we're supporting someone at their birth. And so, yeah, just thinking about like the modern context of it all too.
Yeah, totally. I was thinking about kind of starting from the beginning of what you were speaking to. A lot of women end up getting into birth work, either what I've seen personally in my own community, either through a super traumatic birth or potentially like a really incredible, empowering birth. And they're like, oh, I want every woman to have that. Like there's two ways to go about it, but it's also checking our like savior or rescuer that's like I want every woman to have either not my experience or my exact experience, which we don't have a say in what another person's life path is in general, but especially what another woman's initiation into motherhood is meant to look like, and also what that baby wants their birth to be. I really think that also babies create the exact birth situation that they are meant to come into this world with. There's a lot that I could get into with that I'm not going to because that's a deep rabbit hole, but that's one thing. And then I also have seen a lot of women who have gotten into birth work after experiencing either like a miscarriage or an abortion, a pregnancy release. And in a way, it's almost like they want to like redeem their loss through being able to be of service to another woman, which isn't inherently like a bad thing. I don't think any of these things are like right or wrong. But I do think that the birth imprints that women have not taken time to really heal within themselves and to go through their own grief process, or their own realignment process if they had a beautiful birth, and to just kind of be like, okay, like, how am I going to sit with this in myself first? And then how am I going to make sure that when I show up in this space, I'm not activating the field with my own unresolved stuff? And I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, but it just takes a lot of time. And I feel like I've kind of gone in the opposite direction of you. I've been very deep in women's reproductive care work for many years now, mostly from my own healing. Like I had so many reproductive health issues, chronic vaginal infections, a lot of sexual abuse that I had to heal from, a lot of distortions with sexuality, relationships with men, a lot of my own wounds with my mother and my mother line, a lot of going through my birth stories from my mother line and learning about all of the trauma in birth and being in hundreds of ceremonies and just like crying and feeling that pain moving through me and recognizing that call within me of like, okay, like everything starts at birth. But actually, even before that, everything starts at conception. And then actually, everything before that starts with who you are as a woman in the world, what kind of life you're living, what kind of man you end up calling into your field. Like, the birth of a family constellation starts long, long, long before you're even partnered, before you're even looking at the man in front of you and being like, I think he's the father of my kids. Like, there's so much to it. And so I feel like I've been in that realm where I've felt what you were speaking to of like, I haven't wanted my big introduction into the realm of women's reproductive care to be in a birth. I've wanted to be able to walk through my own path and then to also walk with women through all of the other aspects of caring for our bodies, caring for our reproductive systems long before birth. Like I feel birth is like it's very much in my field, but I'm taking my sweet time with it and also questioning myself every single step of the way. I'm like, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? I don't know. I do believe that it is, but only God knows my path, really. But I think what you were speaking to is really the work that you do, which is full spectrum care. It's not just I show up for the birth and then like, dust off my hands and walk away. It's the entire womb care continuum, which we're going to get deeper into, but it's all of the stuff that we've been learning for a long time. You know, what you're speaking to. Doing a vaginal steam, doing a yoni steam is deeply ceremonial. It is like a full altered state of consciousness. Being able to midwife a woman through her first yoni steam is like midwifery in itself, right? Or any kind of like body work and hands-on care, what we were learning, what I'm continuing to learn with other trainings of like, can you put your hands on a woman's body? Can you help her realign with what her womb is telling her? Can you place your hands gently on her pelvis and hold her through any kind of experiences that she's been through? Maybe boundary violations, maybe medical violence, maybe any kind of like fear and trauma that her tissues are still holding, or just numbness and disconnection, right? Like that's midwifery care as well. It's not just this kind of Western idea of like the pinnacle of birth makes you a birth worker. Like I think it's so much bigger than that. And that's really when we look at an intact culture, a traditional culture, what midwifery care is. It's womb to tomb initiation work. It's walking with women through all the rites of passages that we're traditionally supposed to go through. And if you look at an intact culture, how women end up showing up to birth when it is their time, these women have been around birth from their own birth. Birth always happened in families and in communities. And like when I was living in the jungle, I remember there was a woman who gave birth, not in the hospital. Not a single one of those women in the village is technically a midwife. Like we wouldn't look at any of those women and be like, she's a certified midwife, you know? But every one of the women who showed up were her family members who had had their own births or who had been witnessing birth in the jungle, very much like not resourced by the medical industrial complex, who had just been in that field for so long that it was normal for them. It was like mammalian instincts, like they knew how to not interfere. They knew when to support and step in, and they knew when to just hold back and hold presence. And I think that's also what has been really stripped from like this big charge that so many women are feeling of getting into birth work. The lack of initiation that we had in our younger years. It's like we were, I don't mean to say this judgmentally by any means, but I feel like a lot of women unconsciously are like they're skipping steps of the first part of everything. They're skipping the maidenhood medicine and they're jumping right into the motherhood medicine. And that is not any one woman's fault. And it's not like any one system's fault or any one program's fault. It's just kind of where we're at right now. And so yeah, there's a lot that we could keep going into, but I think it's good to talk a little bit more about your personal perspective of like what is full spectrum care for you and what do you offer to women beyond pregnancy, beyond birth, beyond postpartum? What are you orienting to in those realms?
Yeah, and this it makes me think of like my own story. I had a period recently where I was like super painful. I felt like I wasn't being supported in the ways that I wanted, and it felt like I was just alone. Just like, oh, I feel so lonely. And I was like crying on the toilet. Just like, oh my goodness, this period sucks. And then I was like, I'm actually not reacting to this period in 2025. I'm reacting to my first period. that I had, whatever year that was, where I didn't feel like I was supported. It was like a shock to my body. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm bleeding. It's painful. Like, there's blood on my hands. What the heck is going on? Um, yeah, and just like holding, like, oh my goodness, this is still living in my body because, like, you're speaking to, like, I didn't receive the proper initiation. I didn't receive the proper witnessing. And so I felt like my body was like, not that it was doing something wrong, but just like it was a super emotional charge, like when I was getting my period. And I think like that really is what full spectrum care is. For like for me, what I'm starting to realize is like I actually don't really care. Like, oh, is this person pregnant right now? Is this person postpartum right now? Like, I want to work with pregnant people or postpartum people. Like, that's actually not what the calling is. I think it really is figuring out who are the people I want to work with. Where is that reciprocal, where they want to work with me and want me to support them on their womb journeys, and really being responsive to that and being responsive to what's coming up in the moment. Because, again, like I was speaking to earlier, like we have this tendency in Western culture to like box and separate and like, and we treat it as though, like, okay, well, you're pregnant right now, so let's just focus in on what's happening right now in this specific moment, and then your birth is gonna come, and the baby's gonna be here, and blah, 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 blah. But we might be ignoring so many other things that are actually coming up for that woman in that moment, maybe. And I know this is true for me too. I was like, oh my goodness, no wonder I've been so reluctant to like have a baby because I didn't get the support I needed during this first initiation. So now my body's like, well, what happens if we get pregnant and we have a baby and then there's no one there to support us and we have to take care of this baby on our own? Smart thing for my body to be concerned about. Um, but I think if you approach it from this more like Western or just like even modern day like doula response, like there's just so many things we can overlook. And it feels, I think really what I'm trying to say is like there's one model that feels more linear. And I think what we're talking about is more cyclical and just being present for like what shows up and not necessarily just focusing on are you pregnant or not? Are you postpartum or not? Like where in the journey you are, but more so like you were talking to like is there trauma that's arising? Okay, is that trauma like relationally where like maybe you have trouble asking for what you need, maybe you have trouble receiving help, right, from people, or maybe it is like a boundary violation where you've been violated and that's coming up for you right now. So let's tend to that. Um yeah, I think it really is just looking at the whole person, really, is what I feel like what's coming up and tending to that. And then, of course, like if the person's pregnant, okay, there's other things that you would do, maybe some things you wouldn't recommend or would recommend. Um, and I'm thinking even like of like what I was mentioning earlier, like about when we're on our periods and we're supposed to be resting and saying no to things like that also sounds like postpartum to me, right? Like there's actually not these very big distinctions like we like to think. Like there's things we could take from the postpartum period and apply to our period care, for example. Um, so really, I guess what I'm really just trying to say and focus on is it's looking at that whole person's story. And of course, not just like their individual life story, but also like generationally and like tending to whatever is coming up in that moment with like reverence, witnessing, deep presence, and just care and concern, I think is important. And of course, you can bring in like ceremony and like all these other pieces, but I think it really is just coming up because you have things too where like you may be working with the person who's pregnant, but maybe they've had a miscarriage in the past or they've had an abortion in the past that they didn't really tend to. And that is actually really up and alive for them. And so I knew like when I was coming into birth work, I always wanted to be trained like what is the full spectrum of care because I was working with pregnant people and I saw I'm like, oh, miscarriages happen and unfortunately at some programs if they're serving pregnant people and you have a miscarriage, they'll like dismiss you from services. And I was just like that felt so sad to my heart of like this person's actually in need. And like, yes, I know they're not pregnant anymore, but they still need care and tending to. And so yeah, full spectrum care is just tending to the full journey of the person is really what I think about. And I think for me, I really want to get started more with like preconception slash womb tending. Um, just because I feel like there's so many things we're like holding in ourselves, keeping to ourselves, secrets, pain, trauma, hurt, that I feel like we need to start letting go of, not just because, oh, we want to call in pregnancy and, bring the next generation forth, but I think just us as women also deserve to be happy, to feel good in our bodies, to feel resourced, to feel cared for, like not just because we're having babies, but just because that is part of our like birthright as women. And I know you've talked about some of the womb wisdom we like lost and have gotten away from, and like you're speaking to like that really is what it is. We don't disregard people because they don't want to have babies or because they're not pregnant right now. No, like actually, we still need to take care of you and tend to you in whatever ways you feel called. Yeah, and I think too, even I have some friends, like one of the other birth workers I work closely with, their name is Shay, and they even do like gender affirming, like birth work and doula care. So like if someone has like top surgery, for example, like they're still getting the care that they need. I know for me, I do feel like it'll eventually even morph into like supporting people as like the matriarchs and their family passes and like because that's a lot to deal with and tend to, and like especially like if you're next in line to be the next matriarch, I feel like that's another just like transition and threshold that we've like gotten really far away from. But like yeah, for me it's more so just looking at the individual person's womb journey and story and like supporting them and tending to it however that looks like and feels right for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I think about just the womb in general, I just see it as this incredible quantum, like time travel portal, like what you were speaking to of being on your bleed and just crying on the toilet and realizing I'm not crying as JJ in 2025. I'm crying as the young girl who missed her initiation into womanhood. It happened, but like it wasn't witnessed, it wasn't recognized. I didn't receive any of the tending and care and education and orientation in that threshold. And so I'm crying for her, right? And I just finished up with a very shockingly painful bleed that came through. And my bleed is usually not painful. The month before, I had had like the most peaceful, joyful, liberating, pleasurable, just life-giving blood that I had ever had in my life, probably. And then the exact next month, like the most painful one that I had had in a very, very long time. And it was the same thing that I went through where I was like, whoa, this bleed, what I'm going through right now, maybe has a little bit to do with like stuff that I'm experiencing right now in 2025. But actually, there's like grief and sadness and death medicine moving through me from a point in time in my life where there was like a lot of pain that was trying to be transmuted. And I'm at a point now where somehow my body feels safe enough and resourced enough and educated enough to like tap into the medicine of that time travel portal womb situation that we have going on. But it is very up in the field, as you were speaking to, of like if you are moving into pregnancy, but you never came to terms with a miscarriage or an abortion, if you never came to terms with a sexual assault that you experienced, if you never came to terms with everything that happened to you on birth control, if you never came to terms with like a really painful IUD insertion, like I'll never forget being in Oregon when we were doing our bodywork training and we were doing some pelvic body work, some vulva work. And one of our teachers, Prairie, she came over and there was one specific point in my vulva externally where the woman who was practicing on me, when she would kind of palpate into it, the pain that was coming up, I was like, what is that? Like, I can't understand what that is. And Prairie came over and she was just kind of inquiring about it. And she put her hands on me and she asked me, she said, have you ever had an abortion or an IUD insertion? And I've never had an abortion, but I did have a really horrendous traumatic IUD insertion with the copper IUD when I was 21, I think, when I was 21, and I'm 29 now. So 8 years had gone by, right? And my body was still holding on to that pain, that memory, that implicit tissue memory of that really traumatic violation. I do consider that IUD insertion to be a profound sexual violation. Um, and I was just thinking about like, wow, how grateful I was to be receiving hands-on care in a phase of my life where like I'm not planning on getting pregnant anytime soon. I'm not partnered. Like motherhood is of course in my field, but not as like an immediate thing that's I'm like actively trying to get pregnant or that I'm actively pregnant and growing a life. Like I received that hands-on care to move all of that old data out of my system, out of my tissues and I felt it leave my spirit, right? Like I felt it leave my body. But I was just imagining what would happen if I was in the midst of a birth and my cervix is like, I still haven't been listened to. My story has still not been told from that really traumatic IUD insertion. Yeah, I might have a hard time dilating. Yeah, I might have a hard time feeling safe enough for my tissues to actually open up and give way for that child to come through. I might end up having to have a C-section that I wouldn't want to have simply because I didn't receive the care intending in my preconception phase that would then like make the path a lot smoother and easeful for life to come forth. And so what you're speaking to of like we don't just, discard someone because they're not right now in the act of like conceiving, gestating and birthing and tending to life. We have to look at the whole spectrum of what their womb journey has been, what their womanhood journey has been. And none of that, I mean, we can do it retroactively, of course. Like we're always time traveling through our bodies and through our wombs. That's the nature of being a woman. We are just like these quantum, galactic, surfers of the dimensions. It's what we're doing. It's what our medicine is. But also, if we can tend to it long before a woman is getting to the point of like emergency or trauma or like serious activation in the midst of pregnancy, which is already incredibly activating because you're in an altered state of consciousness all of pregnancy, all of birth, all of postpartum, and into motherhood, your brain literally rearranges itself, right? If we can tend to that beforehand, that gives a woman even more trust in her body to know, I can do this. I can walk through, I am resourced, I have community, and more than anything, my body itself is it's self-healing, it's self-regenerative. And I can do that with steams. I can do that with non-sexual self-touch and with vaginal mapping. I can do that with prayer. I can do that with ceremony. I can do that with herbs. Like there's just so much that I can do that I don't need to outsource my power, right? Yeah, I feel like important to kind of talk about, something we touched on earlier, which is practitionership, right? How to not move into any of the realm of women's reproductive care, women's health, birth work, any of the full womb spectrum tending that we're speaking to without sacrificing ourselves as practitioners. And it's something that you've spoken to me about of, the Black maternal health crisis and some work that you were doing with one organization where there was a lot of misalignment with like what practitioners were saying that they were doing versus what was actually happening in the space. and you having to be really honest about, well, I have to tend to myself. I have to tend to my own reproductive care, my own fertility, my own health and vitality. And it's not, the math isn't mathing, essentially. So let's just talk about any of that.
Yeah. Whew. I'm like, wow, I can't believe it's been almost 10 years since like professionally I've been like in this field. But I worked at two organizations that focused on like maternal health. They were like, one was county adjacent, one was part of this like university slash hospital. And what I noticed particularly at the university slash hospital job was that there was this tendency, like the mission of the organization was to reduce preterm birth rates in like Black and Brown communities. And most of the team were Black and Brown women. It was a very stressful place to work. Things were always like very fast paced, very unorganized, very chaotic, very all the things women do not want our bodies to go through, essentially. And there were times where I would just be like, I was like, well, what would happen like if I were to have a baby right now or like get pregnant right now? And I was just like, I don't think working here that I would be able to carry this baby to full term. And I used to voice that in some of the meetings. And like if I was a leader, I would have been like, stop the meeting. Like we need to address this right now. What do you mean you work here at this organization that's supposed to be reducing preterm birth rates for Black and Brown people, which you identify as JJ? Like what? No, I would stop the meeting. Like I would have been like, this cannot go on. We cannot have anyone working on our team who feels like that. But it was never addressed. It was always kind of like glossed over. And like looking back, I think it was like that outsourcing our power that we're thinking about, of that like, wait, this feels a little mismatched here. And like I was looking for someone else to give me the permission of like, you actually don't have to be here. You actually don't have to work here. Um, that eventually just led me to make the decision of like, this is not the right place for me, because any place that I would be would, one, at least respond to my comment of bringing that up, and would try to do some tending around it. And then just because I was like in that field, so you're like meeting other people who are in the field, there was just this common theme of like, what it felt like was like, we're here to be saviors of all these other people who might be affected by this crisis or be affected by this issue. But we don't have to deal with any of that on like our internal team. Like, whatever, it's fine. Magically, we're all just gonna have wonderful births because we are associated and we work here. And I was like, this is deeply concerning to me. It's deeply, deeply concerning to me, especially knowing how like things were showing up in my body, that I like wasn't sleeping. I was having like stomach pains. I was having migraines really consistently. I was, ooh, ooh, oh my goodness. Literally, when I would get my periods, like during my luteal phase, I would like freak out crying. Almost just like every time. I'm just like, I hate this job. Like, I really want to leave. It's so stressful. Like, all the things. Yeah, and there's just this really common trend, I think in birth work, I think in maternal health, I think just like in general, where our practitioners aren't necessarily embodying what they're teaching us and what they're preaching, what they're talking about. And instead, it's like, okay, this information is for y'all out here. But for me, I had to realize that part of the reason I was called to this work and part of the reason I was called when I was is because I needed to tend to my own womb health. I needed to tend to my own womb trauma that I was ignoring and that I was disassociating from. Um, and it's I've been grateful for it. I think like you said, like when we were doing the bodywork training, I was like, wow, there's a lot of just like tension here and tightness. And I was like, "Ah, that would have sucked if I got pregnant." And like they're already this tense and stretched and blah blah. Like, oh my goodness, it would have been terrible. My ligaments would have been given out if I would have gotten pregnant at this time. And so I really resonate with just like being thankful and grateful for like having this information and ha doing some of these tending while also still having the spaciousness of like, okay, but I'm not calling in a baby like tomorrow or today or like just I really, really appreciate that spaciousness that I've been able to like cultivate for myself and like not feeling this big rush of like, I have to have babies, I have to get them out there, but instead of like actually, taking the time to deal with my period trauma will help. Taking the time to figure out, okay, how do I be okay with tuning into myself, with doing less, with saying no more? That's also a big part of motherhood that I think people sometimes don't prepare for. It's like you are now keeping the energetic boundaries and physical boundary for your baby to keep them safe, right? And also to keep you safe in this very vulnerable and precious position that you're in now that you've had a baby and you have to keep them alive. And so those are some of the things that come to mind, but I do know like when I was entering into birth work, I was still doing it from a very Western, a very like white supremacist model where I was like, oh, I'm here to save these people. I'm here in service to these people. Like, I'm going to sacrifice myself because that shows how much I care and all of these things. And then, of course, going to a birth for me would not allow me to like continue to exploit myself in those ways. It was literally like something like hit me and was like, no, no, JJ. Actually, we understand you've been using these coping mechanisms and strategies throughout your whole life, but if you're gonna really answer this call, you cannot do what you've always done. You have to do it in a different way. Um, and that's been interesting, like figuring out, like, okay, well, what does it mean if I'm not the savior? But like you were saying, like really taking yourself out of it and really just being there to witness and to watch unfold for someone else with their experience and what their ceremony is meant to be, and to not have it be a reflection of that means I'm a good doula, or that means I'm the most knowledgeable, or the best this, or the best that, or whatever. And that's actually been very freeing too.
Yeah, totally. I feel like the the orientation of walking the talk, right? Which is applicable for literally any part of our life. That's how you know that you're walking in coherence, and that's how you know that your life is just in order, that you're walking a straight path. And when we're speaking about it in this context, particularly about women's reproductive care, I told you this, before we started recording, but my bleed came unexpectedly this month because I've been working with some homeopathic remedies that have been altering my cycle. Usually my bleed is very dependable and I'm able to track it correctly and I'm able to take off work. I'm working at a restaurant right now to build up my savings. It's very intense, busy, super exhausting work that I'm doing. It's not like some kind of rinky-dink restaurant job. We're always busy. And of course, my period came unexpectedly, and I was supposed to be working for 3 days straight, one of them a double. And it was a very painful period, which I also didn't expect because my periods usually are not painful. And I had this moment where I really had to sit with myself and I was like, I can push through it. It's just this one time. I'm not going to be doing this restaurant job forever. Like, it's fine. And I was like, Claire, you cannot lie to yourself and you cannot lie to all of the people who listen to your work when you say that your bleed time is a time for rest. You cannot be out of alignment with this. This is not how a practitioner walks. And I had to text my managers and be like, hey, I cannot come in. And really sit with like the feelings of guilt that came up and the feelings of like, I should be able to push through it. Why am I being weak? This is dumb. This is pathetic. Like, all of the stories that like whatever you want to call it, if you want to call it like patriarchy programming or white supremacist programming or perfectionism or like domination culture or just like anti-life culture in general that really does not venerate a woman's fertility and vitality through all phases of her cycle, not just when she's pregnant. I had to really sit with that and be like, okay, no, I'm not going in and I'm not going to feel bad to rest. And then the next day I was supposed to go into work and I was so mad all day. I was like, I can't believe I have to go in. I hate that I have to go in. I hate that this is the culture that I'm living in, blah, 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 blah. I'm like all angry and sad. And I show up to work and my managers are like, hey, we have too many people on. We're making cuts. We cut this person. And she was like, I really want to work. And I had this immediate thing in me being like, oh, I want to go home. And then right after, I had something say, no, you're already here. Just do the work. Like, don't be, kind of like, don't be a little bitch. Essentially, was like the programming that was going on in my head. It was like gun to my head, caught being like, don't be a sensitive little bitch. And I really had to be like, no, who am I? How do I walk as a woman? If I teach on this, if I speak on this, I have to walk on this. And I have to be able to go home and rest. And so I did. And like, I had to grapple with the guilt and immediately be like, no, this is bullshit. I will not hold this in my body anymore. I will rest. And all of that being able to like walk your talk as a mother or as a matriarch or as a grandmother or as a practitioner or as someone who is supporting women, you cannot do that for others if you don't do it for yourself. And that first comes back to how you're tending to your health and your menstrual cycle and your bleed and your fertility and ovulation and the whole spectrum of what your womanhood is looking like. You have to tend to that first. You have to walk your talk with that first. Because otherwise, yeah, you do show up with this like saviorism. You show up with this rescuer and you actually make it all about you. You make it about your ego. You make it about how good you are when at the end of the day, like you're the last person that's supposed to matter in that space as a support system. You just hold a solid container of presence and care and availability, but you're not in there trying to prove something because then it makes it about you, and that's not fair to the women that we want to serve in integrity.
Yeah, it makes me think of this woman I was working with, and we were going for a walk during one of her sessions, and she had asked me, she's like, JJ, when you're doing this work, do you remember that you're a woman? And I felt in her that she was expecting me to say no. Um, which wasn't true for me because I was like, girl, I already told you. I've been spotting because I have irregular periods and like lots of spotting that happens throughout my cycles and sometimes it just comes up. It comes up of like, oh my goodness, like I still haven't tended to my cycle and fixed all the issues and like things are still popping up. But anyway, I was like, no, actually, I don't ever forget I'm a woman. That's actually at the forefront of my mind when I like show up to things. And when I'm doing this work, and I could tell she was like a little shocked by it. But I was like, that is what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to put my needs on the back burner or act like they're not there or use this as like a mechanism where I can escape what's coming up for me. Like, if anything, it puts it in my face even more of like, these are things you really need to tend to and that you can no longer ignore, which I feel like birth work has a tendency to put us right in front of ourselves as we continue to walk the path.
Totally. And that goes into what I was gonna say, kind of the last thing around like that being able to have womanhood at the forefront when you're tending to yourself and when you're tending to other women, it goes into what you were speaking to around the boundaries that you have to create when moving into motherhood. Motherhood is the most yang expression of the yin, of the feminine. Like on the whole pole, if you look at yin versus yang, motherhood is like right on the yang pole for women. And yang energy is deep protection medicine, protection and provision medicine. That's the role that you're walking into. And so if you don't know how to protect yourself, if you don't know how to provide for and resource yourself long before you call another soul into your body and then to your breast to be protecting and providing and nurturing them, in this very intense phase of energetic agility where you're moving through deep, deep yin and you're moving through very intense yang. And then you're trying to also manage that energetic polarity with the man that you're still in a relationship with and not get stuff mixed up. And then not get that mixed up with your child, where then you're expecting your child to take care of you and to like be reordering the hierarchy within the family constellation. Like there's so many layers. And what you were just speaking to of like, what boundaries do you have to have? Boundaries is really what is activated by our yang. Our yang is the one that is saying, like, this is not going to work for my energy, for my state of well-being, for my health, for my vitality, for the juiciness that I carry as a woman, a creator of life, a nurturer of the next generation. Like, how do I call upon that warrior? And I feel like a lot of women miss that part in preconception, and then they get into motherhood and they're not prepared. And then they can't actually activate the intuitive mothering that they want to be able to have online for their child. And then we see children experiencing a lot of things, and we're like, well, why didn't the mother protect them? And it's like, well, the mother actually wasn't initiated into her own solid spine. She wasn't given that. And so it's not like the mom's fault by any means. It's a big cultural gap that we have. But all of that is to say, it kind of goes into the like maiden doula work, maiden birth worker whole conversation is like, I think that it does really initiate women into what boundary medicine is going to look like for you, which then, of course, serves the motherhood boundaries that you're going to place around your family to be that fierce protectress of the sanctity of life and the sanctity of your child's birthright to walk in the world with an initiated mother and father as well. And all of that happens in the preconception. Okay, I'd love to hear, as kind of like our last question, how you collaborate with other birth workers in your practice, because I think that's also a big thing. Women get into birth work and they don't really have like much community, and it can be very isolating and lonely and scary, as you were speaking to, like being in the ceremony of birth without having your own team of wise women that you can be resourced by so you don't have to carry it all alone. So why do you think that that is important in this modern era of birth work? And what are you doing in your own practice to reweave those traditional understandings that like no woman who's birthing and no woman who is in the birth space is actually meant to work alone?
Yeah, this is something I've had the pleasure of trying out in a few different iterations, and I'm figuring out what feels the best, works the best for me. I think the most popular one we have right now is just working in the context of like, oh, I have a backup person that can like come to the birth just in case I'm not able to, or like if the birth goes long, because sometimes birth can take a couple days, you know. It's a marathon, not a sprint for sure. And so that was kind of how I started off, and I had like began working as other people's backups. But of course, because I'm me, I'm always like, let's see how I would do it. Because I'm like, I would always do things a little bit differently. Because what I was noticing is like some people would be like, oh, you could meet the client before. Other people didn't really have like a process. It's like, okay, I'll just contract with you. And from the work that I had done previously, I remember people just saying like that was something that never felt right to them. Like if they were going to the hospital and delivering there, like I don't really know who's going to be delivering my baby until I get there. And so like as my role as a birth worker, I was like, I never want any of my clients to feel that way. Like at the very least, we will do an introduction with the backup person, just so you know them, your nervous systems have like met each other. We can ensure there's like vibe, energetic match, because that's really important in this work too. And so I would invite the backup person to come to like one of the home visits that we do, typically during like maybe the second or third one. And they would like sit, you know, loop them in so they can like do their own teaching too. And I was like, okay, great. That feels nice. I have also collaborated with like other birth workers to do like closing of the bone ceremonies, which have been so sweet and precious to offer to our community. Again, one of those things you can do alone. But I don't really like to. I really do like having at least another person in the space, ideally even maybe three people in the space to help with that. And then something that I've been doing with one of the backup birth workers that I work with, her name is Julie, because she is a mother doula and birth worker and has breastfed her babies and done all the logistical parts of postpartum. I also like if she doesn't get called into the birth as a backup, I'll ask her if she wants to like go meet with the family the day after to like support them with breastfeeding help. She also like tag teams on the visit with me to like talk about postpartum care and talk about breastfeeding, just so people have some education before they have their babies. And then with like the most recent client we've worked with, which the baby was born on the 1st of this month, um, she's essentially doing postpartum visits in addition. So like if the mom wants to focus more on like her healing and like body work and those things, like I'll show up for those visits. But if she's looking for more like help with like baby care and like logistical questions and breastfeeding, then like she'll hit Julie up. And like that made it so we were able to see them just like 3 times in like the first week because I'm whooped after a birth. Give me a couple days before I do a home visit. And so it made it so like we're able to like be more responsive to the client needs for one. But then number two, like can I help with baby care? Of course. Can I answer breastfeeding questions? Yeah. Does it light me up though? Not really. It's not like, I'm like bubbling with life about this, where I feel like Julie really is. And so I feel like working together as a team allows us to like really figure out and parse out like what really feels alive for me. What do I feel called to do? What do I want to do in this moment? And gives us the freedom to like actually do that instead of being like, okay, well, I want to move from the birth space, even though there's all these other birth doulas, but I feel pressure because I just feel like I need to still be offering these services. Like, it lets us move more freely. It lets us be more responsive to like our needs and like what's coming up for us. And then I feel like for me, more specifically, like right now in this moment, like, yes, I have been on my preconception journey, but I feel like it's been focused on like, okay, we're gonna change like the toxic stuff in the kitchen and we're gonna focus on our boundaries and honoring like our bleed and saying no to people and like all of those pieces. But now it's more like, okay, let's focus on nutrition, let's focus on really like more of like I can't believe I haven't done this part, but the like imagining and the dreaming of actually like calling in a baby and being a mother and all of those pieces. And so I feel like it also allows me working with others to be more alive and true of what is coming up and like my own reproductive journey and what I feel like I need to do for my own health and well-being without guilt, without pressure, without like second guessing it because I've been wanting to move into the preconception space for like a year and a half, but I feel like I haven't really allowed myself to because I'm like, but most people know about doulas because of birth, and if I'm not in the birth space, like how are people gonna find me? And like it feels weird stepping away from like having done this for a few years now, but yeah, I think in this modern context, it's very much like you take a training, you start seeing clients, and it's very like individual, which is very scary. I mean, birth in and of itself you never know what's gonna happen. We are, at the threshold of life and death, and that alone can make it feel very scary. But sometimes there's like questions that come up that like, you can't necessarily answer that you don't have enough experience around. So you have to go read and look up sources and, spend more time trying to answer that person's question, as opposed if you have someone else like in your network that you could be like, oh, I can just point you to this person. And I really like how I'm doing it because we're still like operating under the same team. So it's not like, okay, I'll just send you out for a referral and you figure that piece out on your own. But really, like, I'm doing the coordinating on my end because it's like a team member. So then that just feels much more smooth, especially keeping in mind like where these people are in their own reproductive journeys. If they may have just had a kid or like a baby, do they really feel like reaching out to this whole other new person that has this whole other process that they have to deal with? And thinking about those things. And yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind for me of just why working as a team is good. And then I think it's really nice too because we get this like reciprocity of like I have more experience with in the birth space and she has more experience postpartum. And so we get to learn from each other and like exchange and grow in a way that just feels very sweet and spacious and easeful, which is really what I like.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about, well, two things. One, I was thinking about when I was living in the jungle, and I was thinking about all of the ceremonies that I was in. And I consider birth to be probably the ultimate ceremony, right? And when I think about the context of being in, plant medicine ceremonies in the jungle with my incredible elders, my teacher, my late teacher, Abuelo Kerouin, he was 110 years old, right? He was like the leader of his people. He was the spiritual authority of the medicine of ayahuasca, the medicine of Yahe, and all of Colombia. He was incredibly spiritually and politically powerful, right? And I never once, in the hundreds of ceremonies that I sat in with him during all the time that I lived with him in the jungle, never once did he ever offer ceremony alone. He had multiple family members and students and apprentices and ayudantes, like helpers around in the space every single ceremony. Even if there was only like one or two people coming to be healed, he was accompanied by multiple of his family members and students and helpers. And I think about that in terms of any kind of ceremonial context, which is that we need various layers of support, not just the patient or the client who's coming to us that's looking for support, but as the practitioner, as the guide, as the person who is offering orientation and care, we also need our team of support. And I was thinking the other side of it was one of my other teachers, Rochelle Saliga, who I've had on the show before, who's an amazing midwife, and she focuses now mostly on postpartum care. But she speaks a lot to the physiologic design of multiple layers of support that we hold in our body when we look at a baby in the womb. The amniotic sac has two layers to it, which is because if there is, for some reason, a rip or a hole in the first layer of the amniotic sac, that baby has another layer of support right beneath it. And when you take that physiologic design of how life is being created within the body of the mother and you apply it to life outside of the womb, the baby needs to have two layers of support, which would be first the mother and then ideally the father. The mother needs to have two layers of support, which one of them would be the father, and then one of them needs to be some other care practitioner, at least those two layers of support. The father needs to have two layers of support, one of which cannot be the mother. The mother cannot be the support for the father in that moment in time. She is fully focused on nurturing the life of her child, and so he needs to have two layers of support. And then when you throw in the care practitioners of like the doula or the postpartum care worker or the person who's coming around and offering any kind of child care or breastfeeding support, they need two layers of support. And so the way that we're able to look at why it's important to work in community and to co-weave together is because we're not designed to do any of this work alone. It shows up in the exact way that we're formed in our mother's wombs. We need multiple layers of support, and the people who are supporting us need support. And so to expect that any of us is supposed to do life alone, to do our work alone, is just out of alignment with the laws of nature, out of alignment with our physiology, out of alignment with our biology, and out of alignment with like the spiritual blueprint of how thriving life is meant to move through the world as well. So yeah, I love everything that you spoke to, and I love how you're working with your teammates and with the women and with the families and the mothers and the fathers and the sweet little babies. It's amazing. Love it. All right, wonderful. I feel it's a good point to wrap up. Can you offer to people how they can find you and get connected with you and work with you and your wonderful team? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so I think the best way to get in contact with us is through our website. It's just www.fullspectrumbirthworkers.com. I am on Instagram at Full Spectrum Birthworkers, but I don't really post on there. You can follow me that way if you would like. Another way that you could get services if you're like in the Bay Area, California. I am a part of this doula collective called Doula for the People. And we have a couple contracts, one with like Alameda County and one with UCSF that allows us to provide services for families. Some are like birth and postpartum support, and some is post-abortion support. So those would be the ways. And then I am starting to write more on Substack. It's called Womb Wounds and Wisdom. Um, I think that's kind of it about where I am in like the online world. But yeah, those are some ways you can get connected.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will have all of that contact info in the show notes. And it's been such a joy to connect with you. As always, thank you for everything that you shared with me and with the listeners. Thank you so much for your amazing walk in this life, for really being of service. It's such a joy and inspiration to see the transformation that you're moving through right now and really stepping more into the preconception phase, both professionally and personally, all of the incredible alchemization that you're doing right now with the wisdom that you've been weaving on your path and that you've been calling from all of your incredible ancestors who are bringing all of this wisdom back. You know, it's very eternal. It's not just in the past, but it's things that continue to live on because they are those original instructions, those laws of nature that keep us, you know, walking a straight path. So just honoring all of the work that you do. Thank you so much, JJ. Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me, Claire. It's always a pleasure getting to be in conversation with you and to witness your beautiful medicine as well.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.